That address, if you Google it, you find out that a murder was actually committed at the building in 1995. Following night, same thing, came home, all the cupboards were open. And I said, please stop, you're scaring me. My friend had recently passed away. It was an unexpected death. He was in his 30s. We hadn't seen each other in person for quite some time. And we'd been chatting over social media and email like we normally did. It was funny, we met when I was in second year university. He was a bouncer at a club in downtown Toronto. He was a bouncer at the Phoenix. And I think it was his friend originally who was like trying to get us to date, but we just never ended up dating. Like it was just one of those things where it's like, yeah, I like you, I care about you, but I'm just not either in the mood to date or whatever. I may have had a boyfriend at the time, I don't even know. And we just ended up really connecting. You know how sometimes people are just like, yeah, that's my kind of person, and we just clicked. We looked a bit alike, and people thought we were brother and sister when we went out. He was very protective, like not overly protective, but if my girlfriends and I went out that night to the club, he would be like, if anyone gives you trouble, just let me know. And there were a couple of times where we're like, these guys are drinking too much, or they're trying to pick fights with, you know, our people that we're here with. He's like, yeah, no problem, I'll take care of it. And we both worked in the financial district, so we would meet up for lunch and just hang out. And he was the first person I met that was like heavily tattooed. And I didn't have this many tattoos when I met him. Like I had maybe the one on my back. And we just had like a really strong connection. And he moved to British Columbia, and I had said, you know, I'm going to miss you. Like I'm going to miss our daily lunches and our coffee meets and our workouts and stuff like that. And he's like, you know, you can always come to visit, this, that, and the other thing. After he had passed away, I had a dream about him. And in my dream with him, he was covered in all sorts of different tattoos, and he was heavily tattooed in real life. But all of the tattoos were different from the ones that he had. And he had one on his forearm that was all sort of sacred geometry. So all of these different like special shapes and triangles and like little spheres that overlapped. And I said, what's that? And he's like, oh, it's amazing. When you pass over, you can get tattoos and change your tattoos whenever you want. And I was like, oh, that's amazing. And I said, why are you here? Why are you seeing me? You know, you have family, you have a girlfriend, like, why are you talking to me? And he said, I know that we were really close, and sometimes you said that I was like a brother to you, and I just wanted to let you know that I was okay. He's like, I'm sorry I never met your son. I'm flattered that, you know, you were asking if I could be part of his namesake. He goes, but I just wanted to let you know that things are fine. I'm okay. Everything was fine. It was peaceful when I went. I was like, okay. And I woke up and I didn't find it odd because I dreamt about people who had passed in other dreams. Like I've dreamt about people who had passed on before. But this one was really unique because a couple of days later, I was on the Facebook group that we had created for his memorial, and I had posted the tattoo that I got for him, which incorporates elements of sacred geometry. And his girlfriend had commented and said, I love it, it's perfect, he would have loved it. And I sent her a message to the side and I said, hey, I know that we'd never met, but I wanted to let you know that I had this dream about Shay, and he had this tattoo, and that's what inspired this. And I'm getting goosebumps saying this. Not more than 15 minutes later, she sent me a picture of a tattoo on her own arm back, where she had tattooed in the same place, the same shapes and the same images that Shay had in my dream. And she said, thank you for sharing your dream. I had the same one, and that's why I got this. I think it was just one of those things where he was like, I need to show up for you to let you know that I'm like, I don't want to say still taking care of you or still protecting you, but just I didn't want to leave our relationship with like a text message, because that's how we were talking at that point, either text or over Facebook Messenger, just because that's how people talked at that point, right? So I think that like that might have been the rationale for why he showed up. Like I've lost other people too, that are family that I didn't dream about, whereas Shay I ended up dreaming about. So I moved here from Scarborough, so this was like a real step up. And I moved into an apartment that had been a church prior to being an apartment. And the ground itself at that location was the birthplace of William Lyon Mackenzie King, which I thought was really cool. So there was a house there that was leveled and they put this church up. Next door to the church, immediately adjacent to the church, is a funeral home. And when I was doing a walkthrough of the apartment, the landlord was talking about how cool it is that it's a church and it's got all of this original wood trim and these beautiful windows, and it still sort of smelled like incense, which was kind of cool. And he's like, well, what do you think about living in a church? And I was like, well, there'd be funerals in my living room. And he laughed and he goes, I never really thought about it that way. And I was like, well, it doesn't bother me. Here's first and last moved in. And so I moved in November. And probably maybe a couple of weeks later, I started noticing weird things. And like when I say weird, like all of the cupboards were open in the kitchen, like every single one. And I knew that I'd closed them, or the TV would turn on and then it would turn off, then it'd turn on and then turn off. And one night I went upstairs, my bedroom was in the loft. I went upstairs, went to sleep, and I woke up and I heard music playing and I was like, oh, there's no doubt. And then another song started playing immediately after. And I was like, oh, I recognize this song. And I was like, wait a minute, if this is, whatever song comes next, this is my running playlist. And my iPod, I went downstairs and my iPod was out sitting on my kitchen counter and it was playing and the headphones were out and they weren't balled up like normal people, you take your headphones off, put them down. They were out. And it was the first time that I'd been legitimately scared. And I was like, oh, something weird is happening. And I went upstairs and I heard almost like footsteps going up after me. And I was trying to be logical and I thought, okay, it's just my neighbor. He's also going up the stairs. And then reason kicked in and I was like, no, our apartments don't mirror one another. Our stairs aren't next to each other. His stairs are on the other side. So it's not him going up the stairs. And I heard a big bang. And at that point, as any 20-something would do, I jumped in my bed, put my covers over my head because that was going to protect me. And I said, please stop, you're scaring me. And there was another 2 bangs, and then that was it. And the following night, same thing, came home, all the cupboards were open. And again, like you could say, sure, maybe it was the landlord, maybe it was this, maybe it was that, but like cupboards open, nothing taken. And I heard the banging again that night, and I said out loud, we just need to share this place. Like, you don't need to leave, but I can't leave, so we just need to share it. And that was the end of the banging. I never heard any more banging after that. And I asked other people in the building, because I knew a few other people in the building. I was like, do you ever get any weird vibes in your place? And they're like, oh yeah, all the time. And like, we're next to a funeral home, so maybe stuff crosses over or whatever. But yeah, I never had any further like scary experiences with that apartment. That address, it's funny. If you Google it, you find out that a murder was actually committed at the building in 1995. So I was like, maybe that's what that was. Maybe they were just upset and it was like, don't pull up the carpet in the corner of the room because we didn't clean that spot. I don't know. But yeah, that was something that was really interesting. And I was like, oh, maybe that's why the ghost was angry, right? Like when you watch those ghost hunters, it's like, oh, there's all of these unsettled ghosts because we're in an asylum or, some sort of thing. So maybe it was just an angry ghost. I think that the circumstances that people that I know have passed under have always been mostly expected or not, not violent and stuff like that. So maybe that's why they're pleasant dreams and, the ghosts in this house or whatever, they're just, died of old age in the bed upstairs. But yeah, so maybe that's why it was a bit of an angrier ghost. Maybe they're just looking for attention. I don't know. I was raised Catholic, so as a kid, it's like, oh, you die, you go to heaven. But that sort of Catholic belief system was that you don't talk any further with those people. There's no connection any further than that. And I think a lot of people who are raised within a specific religion, as they get older, they sort of develop their own beliefs. And I loved the idea that after you passed, you still existed somewhere. And I have a couple of friends who are scientists and biologists, and they say, well, you can't destroy energy. Like, energy is always energy. So it has to go somewhere. So I was like, okay, well, I don't know where it goes, but it goes somewhere. And having these dreams after friends of mine had passed, another friend of mine had passed, again, unexpectedly in her 20s. And I had dreams of her after she'd passed away, and they weren't anything spectacular. They were just regular conversations. She was saying, look, I finally fit into these jeans that I love. And I think these dreams and the consistency of them, and just like the non-spectacular element of them, made me feel like there has to be something where they're around. And particularly when I had that dream about the tattoo, and Shay's girlfriend had the same dream about that tattoo, the odds of that being a coincidence is impossible, in my opinion. So there had to be something where we both got that same message. So I love this idea that we get messages, and I think that we're all able to receive them, but not everyone gives them the same weight. And it was funny because I don't remember waking up feeling scared or having any negative feelings to it. I woke up and I was like, that was a cool dream. And then when I shared it with the girlfriend and she had mentioned that she got the tattoo, I don't know, I felt like an incredible sense of peace. And since that time, my father has also passed. And I dream about my father the same way. Like, we have conversations, or he'll just, say, I'm sorry about this, or I'm really proud of you for this. And because I have those dreams, and I find that it gives me this sense of they're not gone. Like, I still speak to my dad all the time. I talk to him out loud all the time. And I think it gives you something, regardless of what your belief system is, that if you're still talking to them, if you're still acknowledging them, or if you keep that memory alive, there's no difference in them being physically present or present in some other way. I have a child, and he's been exposed to death simply because of his grandfather passing away and his mom's friends passing away, and he's not scared of it. He just knows it's something that happens. And I said, when I die, don't worry. Like, I'll always find a way to talk to you. And I think that if you want to find a way, you're going to find a way. Like, none of us know what happens, so there's always sorts of things that exist, right? And maybe it's us just giving weight or credence to something that we want to happen, but until you die, you don't know. So I'm just going to go along with the belief that you don't ever actually go away. It's your energy is somewhere. I think that it's something that if you're shut off to anything, you're not going to see it, right? But in the same token, if you're looking for blue, you can find blue. So me just being like, oh, okay, well, I'll say these things out loud to my dad and see what happens. And maybe something happens, maybe something doesn't. Maybe on those days when something happens, it means something to me, or I really needed something that day and I get it. And I think being open to it allows you to sort of be open in other aspects of things too. It's like, well, I don't know everything about death, or I don't know everything about what happens to people, or I don't know everything about life. So I just need to be open to it, and whatever comes in, comes in. And since I've told people about, oh, I had a dream with this person in it, I find that I have them not more often, but they're more detailed. Like, I can recall more things, and it could just be, like you said, like, I'm open to it. So when I'm dreaming, perhaps it's a lucid state where I'm like, oh, this is a dream where I need to pay attention because someone who's passed on is here, and I need to know if they're telling me anything in particular. So I think it's just one of those things where it's, maybe we just need to pay attention more. And, what are the things that we should be paying attention to versus what we shouldn't be paying attention to. So my mother is Catholic, very strict Catholic. And after I had mentioned that I seen my dad and heard my dad in my dreams. She was sort of shut off to it. And I'd mentioned that I'd also was planning to go and see a medium and just see if anything filtered out from the medium. And she said, you know that we're not supposed to believe in that. And I thought that was really disappointing. But at the same time, you know, I've been around other folks and I've shared these stories with other folks who were similarly raised, like sort of Catholic or Christian upbringing. And I find that most people are receptive to it. I think that even if you're taught, no, this isn't what you're supposed to believe in, if someone comes to you and says, hey, this is something that your loved one has said, how do you turn it away and say, oh, I don't want to believe in that, or I can't believe in that? Like, it gives, regardless of who you are, I think it gives you a sense of hope. I work with death just as part of my job. Like, working adjacent to law enforcement, you realize how many people die every day, right? Whether it be through a criminal act or otherwise. And I always find myself thinking for a second, like, what's happening to that family, or what are they doing, or what was that person's life like? So it gives me, I think, an element of grace around everyone's life, because it's just because that life stopped, like as we know it, like the meat suit stopped working. I hope those people know, or I hope those people think or believe that there's still opportunities to connect with those people. I work as a crime analyst, so a lot of the time things that come across my desk include missing, mostly women, women 30 and under, particularly where we are located geographically. There's a lot of Indigenous population, so we get a lot of that missing and murdered Indigenous women part. And you see the comments from the family or the friends or people that are close to that person, and they're saying, you know, you're still with us. I know you're still with us. And I think it's interesting. Like, I love that notion that there's that respect and that connection still with people who have passed on in that belief system. So I think it helps in that regard, where, especially if it's a younger person, when you're seeing people who are teens, you know that those memories are going to continue to live. It's unfortunate. It's probably not always in a positive way for the family, but the fact that the family keeps that memory alive in such a honest and almost like adoring way, where they talk about them consistently, I think that helps me with that part of the job. I love that notion, like talking about ancestors and saying, oh, you know, don't bring dishonor among the family, or just even now I say, you know, my partner, his dad has passed on too, and we always joke, it's like, oh man, your dad's not gonna like that, or your dad is laughing at you right now, or my dad totally hates what I'm wearing. And just the notion that keeping them alive, regardless of what you were brought up believing. My partner was brought up strict Baptist, so again, there's no ghosts. That feeling of having them with you and having them guide you and making them proud, I think that's like a good sort of space to move around in, right? And a good place, a good way to honor them. People have passed on and no one says their names anymore, and I find that that's the true death of a person, right? As long as the name is said and remembered and their favorite songs are played, or, you know, their shirts are still worn, I feel like that keeps them around in one way or another. Part of, I guess, getting to your 40s is you become part of the dead parent club, right? Like, our moms have passed away, our dads have passed away, like, and we joke about that now, where it's, what do you think our moms are doing? What do you think our dads are doing? And, you know, like, oh man, like, they're probably pouring a drink right now, or, you know, just having those conversations with these people that I grew up with, whose parents knew my parents and who watched all of us grow up. It's almost like, okay, this is the stage 2. All of our parents are hanging out together still, just in a realm that we can't see them. And they're still saying that we're idiots and making poor decisions and, you know, should drink more water and all of those things. And we acknowledge that. And there's that sense of camaraderie where it's, this sucks, but it sucks together. growing up, we all, we were told what ghost stories were, right? Like ghost stories are scary and they're gonna hurt you and they're evil. And I've had those conversations with my son because of the house that we live in. And he was like, "Do you think people have died in here?" And I was like, "Yeah, the house is over 100 years old. People have certainly died in here." And he's like, "Well, what if there's ghosts?" And I'm like, "What if there are? Then what?" And he's like, "Well, what's gonna happen?" I'm like, "They'll probably hide our stuff or like, maybe make fun of you or pull the curtains too fast. Do you think they're gonna hurt you?" And he was like, "No, I don't think they would hurt me." And I love that I'm creating this sort of person who doesn't find death to be taboo or scary or anything. It's almost interesting and unique and has all of these different flavors and elements to it. But yeah, I don't think that my view now of ghosts is that they're scary. Like, I'm like, oh, cool. Like even just living in this house, I'm like, I wish the ghosts were a bit louder because you don't seem to come out much. So it's always been in a dream for the most part. However, there have been times where I've either heard a voice or, I'll say something and I'll be like, "I don't think this is a good idea," and then something like the lights will flicker or something will fall over on the shelf, right? And I was like, okay. I'm like, I'm hoping that that's probably someone I know. Maybe it's, a house ghost. But yeah, for the most part, they've always been positive. I think it's important for people to be forced to confront things that don't fit their narrative. Like, people are always going to have ideas about things or feelings, and they're going to be shaped or colored by whatever experiences we have. But I think it's really cool if you rub up against something where you're like, wait a minute, this doesn't fit anything. I've not been equipped with tools that tell me what this is or explain what this is, or the tools I have don't explain what this is. So I think it's a really good experience. It would be like traveling, right? Don't travel to places that you've been before. Go somewhere else. See where something else, exists. Feel like a stranger for a while. Yeah, I think it's good to know that, this isn't all just what you perceive it to be. Sometimes like I don't want to say I get worked up, but like if I have a dream about someone who's passed on, like it gives me that sort of, I don't want to say a feeling of dread, but it does give me that feeling of just sadness maybe. Like the following morning, I'm just like, oh, right, you're not here. But in the same token, you visited last night or we had a conversation last night. It's just not in the same way that it was originally, right? So it's just reframing what those relationships look like now.